He reached for the body camera footage that had accompanied the file. As the video played, Carter's frown deepened. The footage showed Darnell Washington standing quietly outside the store, his posture relaxed, his movements deliberate and non-threatening. Savannah's aggressive approach, however, was unmistakable. "He didn't resist," Carter murmured to himself, rewinding and playing the critical moments again. His pen hovered over his notepad, jotting down inconsistencies, timing discrepancies, exaggerated language in the report, and most damning, the absence of any sudden movement that Savannah had claimed. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. His clerk, Sarah Chin, entered with a stack of additional documents. "Morning, Your Honor," she said, setting the files down. "These are the preliminary findings from Internal Affairs. They've flagged several inconsistencies in Officer Mitchell's prior training records." Carter leaned back, his sharp mind already connecting dots. "Any indication this goes beyond her?" Shin hesitated. "There's chatter that this might be part of a broader pattern. Some of the precinct's veterans have a history of similar complaints, but nothing stuck. Nothing stuck because no one pursued it," Carter muttered, rising from his chair. "Schedule the preliminary hearing for tomorrow. Let's see how Officer Mitchell handles pressure." Savannah's confidence was unshaken as she walked into the courthouse. She'd spent the evening rehearsing her testimony, convinced that her record and polished narrative would shield her. To her, this was a routine hearing, a necessary formality before the charges against Darnell were upheld. She entered the courtroom to find it already abuzz. Reporters murmured in the gallery, their cameras momentarily lowered. Darnell Washington sat with his attorney, Marcus Williams, a man known for taking on high-profile civil rights cases. Judge Carter entered, his presence commanding immediate silence. He surveyed the room, his expression unreadable as he settled into his seat. "Let's begin," Carter said, his deep voice cutting through the charged atmosphere. "Prosecution, proceed with your case." Savannah listened as the city's attorney began outlining the charges against Darnell, emphasizing his suspicious behavior and resistance. But her confidence wavered as Williams countered, presenting bystander footage that contradicted her report. The video played on the large screen, the courtroom falling silent. There it was, Darnell standing still, his hands visible, his voice calm. Savannah's harsh commands and rapid escalation painted a different picture than her report. "Your Honor," Williams said, stepping forward, "my client was doing nothing more than waiting for his sister." The footage shows he complied with every instruction, yet Officer Mitchell escalated without cause. This is not just an error in judgment, it's a pattern. Savannah's jaw tightened as Carter's gaze flicked to her. "Officer Mitchell, please stand." She rose, her heart pounding despite her outward composure. "Can you confirm," Carter asked, his tone sharp, "that your report reflects an accurate and complete account of the events?" "Yes, Your Honor," Savannah replied, her voice steady but tinged with defensiveness. Carter raised an eyebrow. "And yet, the footage, both from bystanders and your own body camera, contradicts key elements of your report. How do you explain this?" Savannah hesitated. "Your Honor, in the moment, I perceived Mr. Washington's actions as a threat. Split-second decisions can be difficult to convey accurately after the fact." "Difficult," Carter repeated, leaning forward. "Or convenient." The question hung in the air, and for the first time, Savannah felt the weight of the courtroom against her. She glanced at Darnell, who met her gaze with quiet determination. "We'll adjourn for today," Carter announced. "But let me be clear. This court will not tolerate inconsistencies, Officer Mitchell. Tomorrow, I expect full transparency." Cliffhanger. As Savannah left the courtroom, her once unshakable confidence was replaced by gnawing doubt. Judge Carter wasn't just scrutinizing her actions. He was peeling back the layers of a system that had long shielded officers like her. She wasn't just fighting for her case now. She was fighting for her survival in a storm she didn't see coming. "Did you really think no one would notice?" Judge Carter's voice thundered through the courtroom, each word landing like a hammer. Savannah Mitchell froze, her palms damp as the heat of the gallery's gaze bore into her. The judge's sharp eyes pinned her in place. "Your actions aren't just a mistake, officer. They're the symptoms of a rot that goes much deeper than you." The courtroom was a boiling pot of tension as the proceedings resumed the next morning. Judge Carter, known for his unrelenting pursuit of justice, wasted no time. He called Internal Affairs investigator Lisa Grant to the stand. Grant, a poised woman with a reputation for integrity, adjusted her glasses as she swore the oath. "Miss Grant," Carter began, "you've reviewed Officer Mitchell's arrest reports and training records. What did you find?" Grant opened a thick folder, her voice measured. "Your Honor, our review found a pattern of discrepancies in Officer Mitchell's reports. Out of 15 reviewed arrests, 5 included language inconsistent with body camera footage. 3 others cited probable cause that couldn't be corroborated by evidence." Savannah shifted in her seat, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. The weight of the accusations was suffocating. "Can you provide an example?" Carter asked. Grant nodded, flipping a page. "In one instance, Officer Mitchell's report claimed a suspect displayed aggressive behavior during questioning. Body cam footage, however, shows the suspect remaining calm and cooperative. Additionally, dispatch logs for the incident revealed discrepancies in the timeline Officer Mitchell provided." The gallery erupted in murmurs, reporters scribbling furiously. Savannah clenched her fists, her carefully constructed confidence beginning to unravel. Meanwhile, Marcus Williams sat at the defense table beside Darnell Washington, his demeanor calm but laser-focused. As Grant's testimony unfolded, he leaned over to whisper to Darnell, "This is bigger than your case. They're opening a door the department doesn't want anyone walking through." Darnell nodded, his face tight with a mix of anger and vindication. "Good," he replied quietly. "It's about time." Judge Carter's voice cut through the room like a blade. Officer Mitchell approached the stand. Savannah rose slowly, her legs feeling like lead as she made her way to the witness box. She took the oath with a trembling hand, avoiding the piercing eyes of the judge. "Officer Mitchell," Carter began, his tone cold but controlled, "your report claims Mr. Washington made a sudden, threatening movement before his arrest. Yet multiple videos show no such action. How do you reconcile this?" Savannah swallowed hard. "Your Honor, in the moment, I perceived his movement as a threat. My training—" "Your training?" Carter interrupted, leaning forward. "Was it your training that taught you to escalate a situation without cause? To write reports that don't align with the evidence?" "No, sir," Savannah stammered, her voice faltering. "I acted on what I believed was a potential threat. Belief," Carter said, his tone scathing. "Belief doesn't excuse negligence. And it certainly doesn't excuse falsifying a report." Savannah's cheeks burned as she sat in silence, the room's collective judgment suffocating her. During the recess, Savannah retreated to a quiet corner of the courthouse. Her sergeant, Thompson, approached, his face grim. "Mitchell," he said, his voice low, "you need to come clean. Carter's not just going after you. He's digging into the whole department. If you've got skeletons, now's the time to lay them bare." "I didn't do anything wrong," Savannah snapped, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her. Thompson sighed. "You might have believed that once. But take a hard look around, Mitchell. This isn't just about one bad call. It's about a system that's been covering for bad calls for years. You're in the middle of it whether you like it or not." Savannah said nothing, her gaze fixed on the floor. The cracks in her confidence were widening, but she wasn't ready to admit it yet. The afternoon session began with testimony from the precinct's training officer, Peter Rodriguez. He'd been Savannah's supervisor during her first months on the force. "Officer Rodriguez," Carter said, "you oversaw Officer Mitchell's field training. What observations did you make?" Rodriguez shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. "Your Honor, Officer Mitchell's technical skills were strong, but there were concerns about her judgment in high-pressure situations." "Concerns that were documented?" Carter pressed. "Yes, sir," Rodriguez admitted, his voice tight. "But those notes didn't make it into her final evaluations. They were omitted." The room erupted again, the implications clear. Carter held up a hand to silence the gallery. "Omitted?" he repeated, his gaze narrowing. "By whom?" Rodriguez hesitated. "Higher-ups in the department. There's a culture of prioritizing appearance over accountability." Carter's expression darkened. "We'll be addressing the culture before this case is over." Cliffhanger. As the session ended, Judge Carter issued a sweeping order, a full review of all arrests made by Savannah during her short tenure. The room buzzed with the realization that this was no longer about one officer. It was about a system on trial. Savannah walked out, her world crumbling, as the storm clouds of accountability gathered overhead. "Do you really think this ends with her?" Marcus Williams' voice boomed, cutting through the courtroom's heavy silence. His finger jabbed toward the gallery filled with uniformed officers, reporters, and spectators. "Officer Mitchell is just the beginning. What we're looking at is a system designed to protect itself at all costs, and it's about to come crashing down." The morning air inside the courthouse buzzed with tension. Rumors swirled about Judge Carter's next steps, and the gallery was packed tighter than ever. Reporters jostled for position, their lenses trained on the defense table where Darnell Washington sat with quiet resolve beside Marcus Williams. Across the aisle, Savannah Mitchell looked pale and drained, her once pristine confidence crumbling under the relentless weight of scrutiny. Judge Carter entered the courtroom, his presence alone commanding silence. Without preamble, he turned to the prosecution table. "Mr. Morton," Carter began, his tone sharp, "have the findings from the Internal Affairs Review been submitted?" The city attorney, James Morton, stood, clutching a stack of papers. "Yes, Your Honor. The report highlights significant procedural failings within Officer Mitchell's training and oversight. It suggests systemic issues." "Suggests?" Carter's eyebrows rose. "Or confirms?" Morton hesitated, glancing nervously at his colleagues. "Confirms, Your Honor." The tension in the room thickened. Carter's eyes swept the courtroom before he gestured to the clerk. "Call Detective Sarah Martinez to the stand." Detective Martinez, a seasoned investigator from Internal Affairs, took her place on the witness stand. Her reputation as a no-nonsense enforcer of departmental integrity preceded her. She adjusted her blazer, her expression resolute as she addressed the courtroom. "Detective Martinez," Carter began, "you've been leading the inquiry into Officer Mitchell's conduct. What have you uncovered?" Martinez cleared her throat. "Your Honor, our investigation found that Officer Mitchell's actions were not isolated incidents. Her training evaluations were altered to mask concerns raised by her supervisors. Additionally, several of her reports contain language consistent with a pattern of racial bias." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Savannah stared at the floor, her face unreadable. "And these alterations?" Carter pressed. "Who authorized them?" Martinez's lips tightened. "Captain Robert Drake, Your Honor. He's currently on administrative leave, but has refused to cooperate with the investigation." Carter's jaw clenched. "And what about other officers? Has this pattern extended beyond Officer Mitchell?" Martinez nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. Preliminary findings indicate at least 10 officers within the department have similarly altered records, and multiple cases show signs of evidence tampering. Across the courtroom, Marcus Williams leaned forward, his voice cutting in. "Detective Martinez, would you say this evidence points to a culture of misconduct?" The prosecutor objected, but Carter waved him off. "Answer the question, Detective." Martinez exhaled. "Yes, I would. The evidence suggests a systemic effort to protect certain officers at the expense of transparency and accountability." Williams turned to the gallery, his voice rising. "This isn't just about one bad apple. This is about a rot that starts at the top and spreads until it taints everything." During the midday recess, the courthouse corridors buzzed with whispered conversations. Reporters scrambled to break the story, while officers exchanged tense glances. Savannah sat alone on a bench outside the courtroom, her head in her hands. Sergeant Thompson approached cautiously. "Mitchell," he said softly, "they're digging deep now. If there's anything you haven't said, now is the time. What difference does it make?" Savannah muttered, her voice muffled. "They've already made up their minds about me." Thompson crouched down, meeting her eye level. "It's not just about you anymore. You're part of something bigger, whether you like it or not. You can either help expose it, or you can go down with it." Savannah's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she said nothing. The afternoon session began with testimony from an anonymous whistleblower, whose voice was disguised to protect their identity. "I've worked in the department for over a decade," the voice said, steady but tinged with emotion. "I've seen reports altered, body camera footage conveniently disappear, and officers rewarded for aggressive tactics that toe the line of legality. This is not an accident. It's a system. Can you elaborate on who orchestrates this?" Williams asked. The whistleblower hesitated. "It's unofficial, but everyone knows who's pulling the strings. Captain Drake. He's the one who ensures complaints vanish and protects officers who play by his rules." Cliffhanger. Judge Carter leaned forward, his voice steady but ominous. "This court will subpoena Captain Robert Drake and compel his testimony. If there's rot in this department, we will expose every root and branch." The gallery erupted into chaos, reporters rushing out to file breaking stories. Savannah sat frozen, the reality of the storm fully dawning on her. The walls were closing in, and the system she thought would protect her was collapsing under its own weight.